Hey, how's it going? This is Roy from RateMyFuneral.com. That was Rate, by the way. Welcome along to what I am calling the 10 do's and don'ts for Cinema 4D startup users, or something along those lines. I don't know, maybe if you're new to cinema, you're not new to cinema, I don't know, maybe you'll find this interesting. It's not quite a tutorial like I normally do. This is just some hints and tips and things that I kind of think that I've learned since I started using cinema and learning about design and doing this sort of thing. So I'm hoping that if I pass these on, maybe it makes a bit of sense, or it causes an argument and a debate and a bit of a conversation. Doesn't matter, whatever. This is all based on my opinion, like I say, through my experience. So if you disagree with it, let me know. Put it in the comments. Be nice, obviously, but put it in the comments. Let me know. And yeah, let's see how it goes. So the first thing, let's start here. Okay, so the first thing I'm just going to look at, and this isn't in major detail, it's just glancing at, is resolution and frame rate. Now, quite often, when you're new to this sort of thing, this can be a bit confusing. So like I say, I'm not going to go into technical details or anything like that. I'm going to put this forward really straightforward. Essentially, a project has a frame rate. So down here we can see we've currently got 90 frames. So what that means is if this frame rate is 30, which by default it is, this scene at 90 frames will be 3 seconds long. Okay, so that's kind of how we work that one out. If we want to adjust this, you press Control and D, and in the project settings here you can set the frames per second. And this, like I say, is for the animation in the viewport and that sort of thing. If we look in our render settings, we can choose from resolutions on the output tab here. And like let's go with the most two common ones currently would be probably half HD or HDTV 720, 25 frames per second. And then the other one might be HDTV 1080. I tend to go for the 24 frames per second. I think a lot of it depends on where you are and what you're doing. But the important point is, let's say we select this one, 24 frames per second. We need to make sure that our scene matches this. Otherwise, when we go to render out, it will render at 24 frames per second, but all our frame rate information will be done at 30. So, with this in mind, we make sure we set that to 24 as well, and now that matches. So, the thing you've got to now keep in mind is depending on how you're going to export your scene. So, more than often than not, pretty much basically every time, I tend to render out to PNG and do as an image sequence. Job's done. Then what you have to be aware of is when you go into After Effects, let's say I've just imported my PNG sequence here, by default After Effects will try and see a PNG sequence as 30 frames per second. So you kind of want to right click, interpret footage, main, and then set whatever you did. So if it was 25, set it to 25, and now that will match correctly, and you'll see here 25 frames per second. You can put that into your composition and everything will match up and it will all be fine and work lovely like so. So that's kind of all I'm really touching on with frame rate and that sort of thing, but just maybe something to take into account. Okay, next, something that comes up quite often, and that is basically trying to find the balance between the best way to do something and the quickest way to do something. So occasionally questions will come up like, you know, how can I render multiple different products in multiple different scenes and have them all come out as individuals? And in that case, it's probably worth spending a bit of time coming up with a method to do that nice and easily. Another question might be, I'm trying to build a brick wall that all the bricks are in different positions and stuff, and it might actually be best just to literally sit and place each brick one by one and place it how you want it. Yeah, you could probably use a cloner and use a random effector and do that, but it may not be quite how you want, plus you've then got to mess around with certain bits. And this is where, like I say, finding that balance where sometimes what you do is quicker and gets it done, whereas other times, depending on how much detail you want, how much control you want, it's easier just to get in there and just do it. Quite often you'll find getting in there and just doing it and spending the time that you thought would be too long is actually quicker than finding the easier way. So not every time, and obviously it's really nice to find an easy way to do something. But sometimes, you know, a little bit of, I hate to say laziness, but you kind of, when you start thinking, oh, I don't really want to do that because it's going to take me too long, unless it's a deadline issue, you know, don't be lazy, just do it.
Just do it!
I think that's quite an important one. So let's look at being organised. Now, this is a thing that, let's face it, we all occasionally do stumble with. But it's just general things, like try and stay organised whenever you can. You know, if you've got lots of things in your scene, name them. Don't just go, oh, I'll come back to naming that later, because it will cause you problems. You know, this is basic housekeeping. The other thing is textures, and when using external textures in cinema. So I thought I would just do a quick example of this. So here I've just literally created an empty project, called it example, and I've saved it here. So that's fine, that's how it looks. If I go into the scene and put something in here, for example, let's make a cylinder, whatever, and I want to add an external texture. So a nice easy way to do this, Cinema's made this really easy. If we get our image, which happens to be a PNG, RMF logo with an alpha background, if I drag that into the materials section here, it will say, this image is not part of the project search path, do you want to create a copy? And because I've already saved it, this is actually quite a good idea. So if I say yes, and now we look in the folder, you'll see that a text folder has appeared, and it will put a copy in there. This is really, really handy. Now, quite often you'll make a scene and you won't have saved it, and you might be putting textures in. And obviously clicking yes to that isn't going to put it in the texture folder because you haven't saved it there yet. So it's a kind of good idea to make sure that whenever you start a project, do a save first, and then this feature will work. Short of that, make sure that every texture, external texture that you use in your project is in this text folder. That way, if you need to move this to another machine or do anything like that, you just grab all of that, put it together, open it on the new one, and it will work. Otherwise, if this texture isn't in this folder and you go and hit render, I think the texture has to be used. There you go. It will complain. It will say that the asset isn't there. And the nice thing is that all we have to do is make sure that that logo is in that folder, and now it's there again. So again, another good important thing for housekeeping, keep everything together. One final quick tip I'll show you here is if you've done quite a big project with lots of things going on and this hasn't happened, there's actually an option here, save project with assets, and that will basically save it into a new folder with all the textures and everything together. And that's a really nice feature. Tutorials, watch them. Watch as many as you can. Just spend time watching tutorials. You can learn so much just from watching tutorials. I mean, watch my tutorials. Obviously I'm teasing there, but no, seriously, watch tutorials. But what I would say is only ever use tutorials to learn how to do something. Don't then just copy it. Again, it's another thing it's a tendency when you first start out. I did exactly the same. I went and watched a bunch of tutorials. I made the exact same thing they made in the tutorial, and then I put it on YouTube. And now when I think about it, I think, well, that was pointless. All I'm doing is literally just taking somebody else's work, somebody else's thought, and just pretending it's mine, essentially. Even crediting and saying, oh, I did this via this tutorial. Wouldn't it just be so much better to make something, put it on YouTube and say, I watched this tutorial and it gave me this idea. So again, it's just another thing to just think about something in a slightly different way. Don't just rip off other people's tutorials and rip off other people's things. Use them to inspire you to create something new. And you can't really go wrong with that, can you? So this one was something that I used to do all the time, and now when I look at my old work, it annoys me. So this is a bit of a personal preference thing, but it's watch your backgrounds when you're doing objects in a scene. And I'll show you an example. So if I just create a floor and hit render, we've got this black background here. And like I say, this is a thing that when you first start out in cinema, you kind of don't really tend to think about because you're too worried about everything else. You want to add your object into the scene and you want to, oh, well, there's a light. Let's add a light into the scene and we'll move that over here. That's great. Yeah, we'll make it a shadow. Oh, soft shadow. Yeah, because soft shadows look cool. And I want this, a little bit blue over this side, and maybe I'll have a copy of this light and we'll put this over this side and we'll turn it down a bit and we'll make this one maybe a bit yellow, and then we'll hit render, and yeah, that looks fantastic. So let's do some camera animations. But what you've got is this background that just goes off into black. And I just think it looks horrible, to be honest. And this is why I created InVideo as a thing to help me not have to worry about this. So I took it out of the equation. And so, like I say, yeah, it's a bit cheeky for me to put this in here. But to me, it was a big enough problem to create something to resolve it. As long as something is done about it, it looks fine. But just don't fall into the trap where you just don't think about it. That's all I'm saying. It's a really good thing to just randomly make stuff whenever possible. If you ever get an idea and you just want to make it, just do it. Find a way, find some time. A lot of people do the, I said the everyday style projects where literally every day without fail you'll make something, be it a still, a short animation or something. I wish I had the time to do that. Not everybody does. Some people do. Some people will make the time, and that's, to be fair, a pretty good attitude. It's a good idea to find competitions, challenges, things like that, and enter them. Make stuff and join in. Never be afraid. Just do it.
Just do it!
Probably the single most important thing for a good animation or even still is the lighting. You really can't beat having good lighting. You know, you might have made a lovely model and you might have textured it well, but then if you don't light it properly, then you're essentially going to ruin what you were working on. So again, this is just something to think about when you first start. It's a good idea to research lighting, very, very much so. And again, spend the time on your lighting. You know, depending on how important it is to you, how good it looks. So let me just, this is by no means a fully comprehensive guide into lighting in cinema, but you know, this is supposed to only be a couple of minutes long each section, so I'm just going to quickly go through the lights themselves. So if we just add a light to this scene and move it up above our guitar here and press render, this is what we end up with. And obviously that's quite flat and horrible. There's no shadows. So your light has shadows. So you have the soft shadows. So this is quite quick to render, very basic soft shadows. The ray traced is very quick to render hard shadows, so maybe you would use these for external shots, outdoors types of things. And then area, which is probably generally the best one to use if you're doing a product shot, because it will give you the most realistic shadowing. But as you can see, that does impact the render time a little bit. The positioning of the lighting is very important. Typically you would use something like a 3-point lighting system, where you would have a light off to one side, perhaps something like that, and that would be your key light. Then you might have another light that would be off to this side that you maybe not have quite so bright, perhaps still with an area shadow. And maybe you'll make this one a slightly different color. Generally your lights, unless you're LEDs, you know, you're not really using completely white lights. You'd be using slightly off yellow or something like that. So maybe we make this slightly off yellow. And then you would have an overhead light, or hair light, and then that's above there. And we might want to turn that one down a little bit like that. And then if we just hit render on that, you know, that's already looking a little bit better. The shadow is not quite so harsh, it's a bit softer. We've got some light coming all around. We might want to look at getting some reflection in our scene. We don't have any reflection with this, so you need to put other things into the scene in order to reflect off. So that can be anything from literally, you know, planes that have just got a you know, a luminant texture on them or something like that. So you might want to put that, you know, just out of the scene and up out of the way. It takes a little while to get the positioning right, but then you could end up with a nice sort of reflection going across where that is. I haven't achieved it there, but where would that be, just out of curiosity? If we were to put this here, do we see this? No, obviously it's blocking it, so we need to maybe move it up a bit. There it is, so we can see it there. So perhaps we would turn this maybe this way, move it up a bit. Right, so there we've got a reflection. We'll just maybe move it that way a little bit. This is a proper juggling act. It's a good idea to have a few separate cameras. So there we go. So we've made a line go across it. So just as an example, you know, maybe we would move it that way a little bit, like that. There we go. And now we've got, you know, a bit of detail going on. But obviously this is just really quick. I'm just trying to give you an idea to think about lighting and stuff like that. And obviously inside the lights there's a bunch more stuff that you can do with the fall off and the way it shows, and some lovely features and all of that. So it's worth having a play with all of this sort of thing and doing that. Obviously the other method is get in video and let that deal with all the lighting for you. But obviously I'm not going to go promoting that in the middle of this video like that, because that would be shameless. Pay attention to detail. This is a do. This is a definite do. If you're going to do this, this is the way I see this. If you're going to do it properly. Put the effort in. Pay attention to the details, the little things that make your animation special. The little things that when somebody else is watching, they may not pick up knowingly, but subconsciously it's in there as a little part of it. Maybe liken it to a bass in a band. The bassist, you know, the bassist doesn't ever get too much credit. And good bass you'll never hear, but the moment the bass is wrong or not quite sounding right, it makes everything sound crap. And it's the same in my mind, it's the same with attention to detail. Do all these little bits right, no one will notice them. Do all these little bits wrong, it makes the whole work look a bit naff. So, attention to detail. Something I like to do quite often is actually go back and check my old work. I hunt through my old folders of where I've backed up before I've wiped the PC or whatever. And I just open up my old projects and I have a look through them. And what I'm hoping to see is that I'm better now. So if that makes sense, basically I like to see my own improvement because that gives me confidence in what I'm doing now. It tells me that I'm obviously learning, and that's great. I have a kind of thing that if I don't look back at what I made 6 months ago and think that's actually a bit naff compared to what I can do now, I'm not happy, because that means that I've not improved. So I think this is a really good thing to do. Every now and then, just have a hunt through your old stuff, and even take something that you maybe tried. Occasionally I'll look at the things that I did literally within the first few months of starting playing with cinema, and I'll open them up and I'll have another go at doing the same thing, but using the techniques I now know, and see how it comes out differently. Some things will be easier to do, some things will have a much better method, and I might make it, you know, look a lot different. It might spawn something else completely. But again, I think this is a really good thing, just to go back, look at your old stuff and see how much you've improved. Yeah. Finally, last one, and this I think is a really, really important one. Don't be afraid to get out there and show your work off.
Make your dreams come true!
It's really hard to take bad criticism. It's really easy to take good criticism, but you'll learn more from the bad criticism than you will from the good. It's one of those things where if somebody says to you, no, let's say 20 people say, what you've just drawn there, what you've animated, looks fantastic. That looks really, really good. One person says, I think that's a bit crap. That will negate those 20 people in your heart. You know, it will make you feel really bad. So it's really good to early on learn that it doesn't matter if people don't like something you've done. Have a listen to what they're saying about it and think, do I agree with them? Perhaps inside I maybe do. Could I use this in the future to help me make it better? I get so much grief from various people throwing random insults my way for things that I do, but I now really don't care. When I first started, I did. It bothered me. Now, don't care, you know. I think this is a really, really important thing. Do not be afraid to get your work out there and just share it. Like I say, as long as it's your own, you're being original, you're doing your thing, great. Don't put it out there if it's someone else's, but that goes without saying. But that's, I think, really important. So we're going to leave it with that one. So this one has been obviously not a normal tutorial. This has been completely different. There's a lot more addressing the camera stuff than I normally do. I hope I haven't waffled too much. Maybe it's useful. Again, check out my website. Please go and have a look. There's tutorials on there. There's giveaways, free downloads. There's premium downloads in Video Pro. I won't mention again. And yeah, so go and render stuff, go and make stuff, and feel free to share stuff. And again, like I said earlier, anything that's in this video that you disagree with or you agree with, stick a comment in. Let me know one way or the other. You know, perhaps you've got a completely different way of looking at certain things that I've looked at, and it'll make me go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, and I like this idea, because that means I'm learning. Cool. Have a good one. I'll catch you again soon.